right.
Hey,
It's on.
it's on again. All right, guys. Really glad to be back with you guys. Again, I'm Dr. Danny Holland. I'm a therapist, as I mentioned last time. Some of you know that. I work with families, individuals, and couples. And professor at Regent University. This is my wife, Jamie.
Hey, how are you? I'm a doctor of nursing practice, and I teach, and my role is a clinical nurse specialist when I'm in the hospital. And yeah, here we are, still here, still sitting pretty close to each other.
Yeah, we're still pretty close, even though we're 7 days into this with you guys as well too. So we're married, of course, and we have 4 kids. So we are definitely having a good time. We're doing these because we realize that there is nothing more contagious than hope. We want to give you guys some hope and help thrive during the season here of disruption as well. Yeah. And that's our hope too. So
kind of share some of our experience. With our community.
We do. We have a great community. We've had a lot of fun with this, but it's also been some really challenging things. So we want to make sure, we're giving you some tools, giving you some experiences, sharing some of our experiences, and learning from you guys too. But we want to, help you guys experience the joys of disruption. And so we're tackling some tough topics and issues and different things that couples may experience. And so go ahead and invite anybody. If you want to invite anybody to watch this, we'd be great. They may benefit from it too.
Honored.
So yeah, we'd be honored. I think yesterday we talked about predictability and control a little bit. It's very unusual that everybody in the entire world is experiencing some level of disruption of their predictables in their life. And, I think that's really the big thing, is that we really begin to understand that predictability and control give a lot of stability to life. And so we really want to kind of look at that a little bit and discuss some of the dynamics surrounded around that too. And so, we were talking a little bit yesterday too about 70% of conflict in marriages is unsolvable, issues that, require some level of compromise. And so, and that conflict doesn't really mean, it's not a predictor of marital outcome. People who don't fight get divorced. People who argue and have conflict stay married. There's no prediction there. But it's all about how we can really manage that conflict. That's what we kind of want to talk about today, because we realize that both for us and for everyone else, the dynamics that are going on right now in our culture and a lot of things happening from government and from the CDC meant to fight this virus do have impacts on our home life. And so we want to kind of talk about some of those things.
Sure.
And so, we want to kind of get into what some of the issues are, that are forcing these things, and how do we handle them as couples, and so, the whole quarantine thing and the social distancing, that creates its own dynamic here with us and in families. That alone can cause some different parts of conflict too. Jamie, what are some of the standards, that people are trying to adhere to?
Well, there's social distancing, the 6-foot rule. There's all kinds. I actually don't really want to get too far into the standards because you can read them on the CDC, and I highly recommend it. If you have a hard time with the interpretation of them, I'd be happy to expound further, but just for the sake of not soapboxing here, I really would rather not.
Well, I see so many people, though, just trying to get their last day of freedom in, and just trying to do whatever they can. And it seems like to me that people are either on the side of hysteria and panic and fear, or totally dismissive. I know most of us are in the middle, but I see both those sides jumping out.
There's definitely a continuum there of people, and there are a lot on both sides.
Yeah, so, in the middle there, though, we're all trying to flesh it out in our families and figure out how we're going to adjust, how we're going to change some things. And so, we just wanted to kind of facilitate that conversation here a little bit and what we might do in those conversations too. But, rarely do couples ever, I would say never, have exactly the same values. We all have different radars. Our radars are set differently to different things. For example, Jamie, what is the one thing that you told me I could never own?
A scooter.
A scooter. Well-known fact. Yeah, okay, there's reasons, though.
And not that you ever wanted a scooter, but he can't have one either.
Now I want one. It's the forbidden fruit. The forbidden fruit of the scooter.
Right. I have seen way too many injuries. I'm not talking about a motorcycle. I'm talking about on scooters. Scooters versus motor vehicle accidents. And some of my first days of nursing, I saw so many amputations and even death and brain injury from scooters. So that's an absolute no. Nobody in my family can have a scooter.
Yeah, so for the record, I would like to note that she did mention I could own a motorcycle. So for everyone watching out there, please note that. Let the record
safer than a scooter.
Let the record reflect.
Danny
can own a motorcycle.
Didn't say you could ride it.
Oh, ouch! So we're gonna have to have a little conflict mediation on that later. But yeah, so I mean, what's really cool about that though is like, Jamie's your professional experience has shaped your view of scooters, things, and so we all have experiences through our lives, different things we experience throughout our lives that shape the radar that we have over what's really our non-negotiables. Mm-hmm. But very rarely do we have the same standards. And I think that's probably the same for COVID-19 as well, too.
Yeah, I think there's level of standards, too. You have some solid foundational standards, and I think you do share those. But then as far as 100% sharing, it's your life that shapes you, and shapes your standards, and none of us have the same experience. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's why we want to look at some of the things we've done and some of the things we continue to do to be able to.
I've been doing this week.
Yeah, we keep in order to try to figure out some things. I have a couple of tips, and we're going to kind of flesh it out between us, so you guys can kind of get an idea too. But a couple things are really important. I think the one thing we've done is we've recognized the differences in each of us, and. It's really difficult. Some couples work hard to control the information they give because they don't want to upset. They're trying to control the emotions of the other person or whatever, and they try to control information. And sometimes people end up trying to be mind readers, and it's really difficult to know where your partner stands. And so I've always thought we've done better the more we've communicated on things and had that safety to talk about them.
Yes, we've you're actually even better than I am at creating the safe environment. Give it to the therapist to be better at that. But he does create a really good, safe environment so that I can pretty much discuss all of this. And I don't he's actually really good at not becoming panicked. I don't generally report in a panicked way because I'm very factual, but the reports that I often give could cause panic. And I know that, but I don't have to safeguard what I say when I talk to him.
Yeah, and the beauty of that is by not being reactive to things you say.
Right, you're not reactive to it.
But the beauty of that is that I know that facilitates for me to get better understanding of what you're going through, because I know you'll keep telling me what's going on if I can just create an environment where it's safe for you to be able to do that. So, and the more I know that, the better. So the more I can understand that, which really leads into the next point is
you also tell me when it's like, what's going on? Yeah, I can actually explain it in a way that wouldn't cause him to panic when there is a place where it's like, whoa, what? And I can explain how that happens or whatever.
Yeah, that's a huge help. I mean, definitely.
He also is really good at that.
And what's good for us, though, is that it helps me to better understand you. And that's one of the big points here is just try to understand your partner more than you try to be understood by your partner. Yeah. I mean, seek to understand, because the more you understand where they're coming from and how important it is to them, it's going to formulate the better response that you're going to be able to give. And so I really appreciate you sharing those things. And no matter how they're shared, it's really critical. And you got to kind of own what's yours. Sometimes, you have triggers, are yours. I have triggers that I know are mine. And, we kind of have to know what's ours. So we're not expecting somebody else to change something that really they can't change. But I think one thing we're really good at, and a lot of couples are too, is understanding we're on the same team.
Yeah.
Now, I think that's good when we're at a place like we are right now, in a peaceful place, talking about this. But when you're all worked up over something, it's hard to realize that sometimes. But understanding we're on the same team and we have the same goal.
That is good. You and I do have the same goal, but we've had to hash it out a bit to figure out what the goals are and understand why they are and those sorts of things. This isn't light stuff. It's not easy. Yeah. And there are times, but I think, I don't know, I said, it was like, whoa, same team, like right in the middle of a conversation. Whoa. Like we can kind of call it out, and it's not a bad strategy because you're reminded that, the whole world's on this team right now. Yeah. So,
Well, you realize, like, if you had if you're watching a sports event, which none of you are right now, which
which is why we're here.
Thank you for the additional views.
Yeah.
But when you're watching a sports event, we
that.
disconnected for a moment there, I think, but we should be back now.
Yeah, go ahead.
We can synergistically, though, connect, and we can synergistically build the sum of him and her together and have that moment and have that experience. And that's what we kind of want to focus on, too, is making sure we create the best in each other. And we make sure the relationship has the best. So if that makes sense. And so hopefully we're still connected.
I think so. Keep it rolling.
Good. But again, I remember, Jamie, when you had me really encouraged to switch over to plant-based eating.
Yeah. There was a point that conversation had to happen. And I'm not saying that that's the only way or whatever. I do advocate for it. But for him, that was what was really going to work, and it has shown. And it was something, but it was multiple conversations, and I had to see his side and recognize his side. And
well, you brought strength to that too,
and I was able to help support it more than it was my decision for him. It was just he asked questions about it, I answered the questions, but then I was able to support it at home.
Well, you definitely had the expertise in it. You did a lot of the research in it and really kind of encouraged. And again, in the us, I mean, you had a lot of that knowledge, a lot of that understanding.
Well, and everybody, and there's many things. It's not just eating or whatever that your partner supports you in, and so there's lots of options there.
Yeah.
Lots of different things. Like, and for you, you were a law enforcement officer for 10 years. He brings a totally different perspective than my perspective.
Yeah, it's a different set of strengths, and so there's times we have the way we do things as a family is a little bit different, maybe.
How we approach things.
Yeah, how we approach things because of that experience I've had. So that can make our family, a little bit safer in different areas too. So really maximize the strengths both of you bring, and by not getting too competitive over who's winning and who's right. It's really about the greater good and the overall win here. But and it's so important we avoid that negative fixation. We don't get caught up on the negative. The negative is is really easy to get caught on because it violates the norm. Most things are good. Most of our partners do great things for us, 30, 40 things a day probably that are great. And it's so easy to get caught up on the one that is not great. So really kind of trying to remember, look, we need to continue to realize that they want what's best for us too. And, and just keep it in mind, whatever you feed will grow. If you feed into someone's strengths, they will expound that strength. And we want to do that. Husbands, you guys want to feed into the strengths of your wives, and wives into your husbands. Because when you do, you're going to be able to develop that strength in them, and which is going to help the relationship overall. And it's been cool watching you develop and kind of expand from everything you've done. And it's just neat because you bring a lot of strengths to this family. Yeah, and just keep in mind, you got to let that greater good rise to the top in all of this too. So, but let's kind of bring it back into this story a little bit because all those tips are good. But when we talk about the family in our home, the difference between panic and hysteria and the actual practices that increase safety. I'm really skilled at stopping certain kinds of threats, but not viruses. So, in our family, you have strong convictions, very specific thoughts about these things. So, as an equal part of what we got here, I submit to your radar on this because it's set more sensitive. So, just kind of describe your standards and your balance for the home.
For me, somewhere along the way, I had to. This is a good opportunity to do this while we're at home. But in my educational journey, one of my assignments was simply to write a mission statement and to define my three top core values that don't change. These will always be in place no matter what role degree I have. And this is really a beautiful assignment because when you actually start doing it, it really takes some thought and to what you can do and what you can't. What would work, what would I never change on. And so one of my dearest core values is that my community is my ohana. It is my family, and I will treat everybody in my community and anybody around me, not just but any human, I will treat as my family. And so for me, that is really knowing my core value on that is where I am inflexible. I won't well, it doesn't affect my family. It doesn't affect my nuclear family. It doesn't affect this person, but it could. But so I would treat everybody and try to consider all of those pieces. And so,
well, you said core value, and that's really powerful because our core values are like that compass that guides us internally.
yeah.
Everything we do, what are the things you cannot not do? What are the things that you will, die for, those values? Right. And when you can identify those, they really do lead and guide a little bit. And you said they're inflexible. I love how you kind of said that.
Yeah, and so the other thing is, like, and when it comes to this virus, I also apply the ethical concept of, or the actual, the old thought of, just because I can doesn't mean I should.
Yeah.
And so we have these regulations and we have these things, but we know the risk that we could be to another person, and an undefined another person, and you're in my ohana. So that's just because it doesn't dictate exactly how far I can go, doesn't mean that I should. And so that's a really big piece. It's kind of like when you're, I'm not trying to get to the edge, not trying to get to the boundary. I'm trying to live inside of the boundaries that they've set in a real and comfortable way. And there are ways to do that, but it does take some sacrifice. This isn't vacation.
Yeah, definitely. And so, you talk about this though a lot. I mean, those are your areas that, obviously you have this passion for, and you have a good sense for. What are your inflexibles? I mean, you got those, and then what are the flexible areas? Maybe what are those things
my not flexible ones?
Yeah, what are the areas that we know the areas that you're kind of, that you're really kind of the core values of it, but in general though, where are you at with some of these things as far as your values and the areas that you're really inflexible in these areas, things that you really think are critical?
Definitely the data, knowing and going to the source of the data, not just listening to someone's implication or misinterpretation of the data. That's one of my big things I really believe in. So I do that and follow those standards respectfully. And then some of the other things that you've seen is just I will advocate. I'll always advocate for doing the right thing. And I am also trying and then protect. So that's and this is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, definitely. Question? I mean, I love how you said you go back to the data because it's always something we've had this conversation several times. Where it's where are the sources? We'll often watch TV or we'll see things, and Jamie will just say, "What's the source on that?" And I see her pull her phone out of her computer. She's not just social media hunting or whatever. She's really just looking for what's the data actually saying? Who is this actually accurate? And there's a lot of misrepresentations and circling reports, and it can be really tricky though to figure that out. You know?
I've heard and you hear people say things like implied in a recent report and they'll state one of my governing bodies. They'll state the CDC or the VDH or the WHO, the WHO, and but that may not be what they actually said just because they stated it in an implied manner. Implied, it just gives a whole ton of room for error. Yeah. So
well, that brings up a good point though. What do you do when you get to this place and maybe you don't agree with the severity of the recommendation?
Oh, so long as it doesn't, and I don't always agree with everything. That nobody would always agree with everything. That doesn't make sense. But even so long as it doesn't mess up my or challenge my ethical standards, I'll follow the recommendation. Yeah. It's just respectful, and maybe I don't know everything. Maybe there's something that's out there that I haven't seen. Maybe what's being presented is partial, and I just try to live by that. I'm not living fearfully, but just I don't assume that I know everything about something that's only just begun.
Well, and here's the thing where we come back to our conversation a little bit. What's really good, I think, between us two. No, that was really good, but I mean, when we're talking about actually the marital conflict, and sometimes my radar is not set there, and so what I love, Jamie, is that you're open to have that conversation and say, okay, without being defensive, how can we have this conversation? I can discuss this with you without you internalizing it as an attack about your knowledge or those things, where you are able to flesh out that thing with me, because you can help me shape my values on these things, my responses, when I don't really have a good, real solid thought on these things. I can see both sides of an issue. You can really help me by being open enough to listen and entertain my questions and let me flesh them out with you. And that's where conflict is good, where we can actually have conflict but in the conflict, we actually are getting somewhere. We're actually working through some things, and we as a couple are getting on the same page to make sure we can do that. Now, if we're good at that, we can avoid a lot of conflict in the future by understanding those things too. But, I really appreciate that and being able to do those things and what you've done in those areas. So what are your flexible areas?
My flexible areas?
Yeah.
What are my flexible areas? I'm pretty uncompromising in a lot of areas, so this was a hard concept. I'm open to listening, and I'm open to trying to not become defensive while maintaining my passion for what I'm actually what I represent and what I do. And so that's what's important. I have had many very frustrating conversations this week, no doubt. But there are scenarios, because everything's changing very rapidly. Yeah. And these are scenarios where, there are some scenarios where flexibility is required. And there are things like I can't say, don't leave the house ever. And that's not actually what the recommendation is.
That would probably be one of the better practices.
It's not what I've said, but you really...
I remember going back to the data, people wearing masks around, and you immediately said that's not recommended because that's actually could be more dangerous than...
Yeah, when everybody grabbed a mask
without
symptoms.
CDC is all trying to do what they can do, and they're giving good advice. But, talk about those things. Like today I had to get gas in the car. And the whole time I'm there, I'm thinking, what would Jamie do? And I'm like, oh man, I touched my credit card. Then I'm like, oh, then I touched the gas pump. Then I had to get my credit card again. Oh man, and I got to get to the car, back to the hand sanitizer. It's attached to the car. And before I get back to the hand sanitizer, I had to touch the key, and so I had the key and I'm like, okay, what did I touch? I'm trying to keep a trail in my head of what I've touched to thoroughly douse it. And by the way, I'm not sure my key works any longer, but again, I'm just trying to channel Jamie into what I'm supposed to be doing in this moment. But those are areas where you just got to be flexible and try to figure out what is, what you're going to do, and
we have hand sanitizer.
And that's really where we come in then with us working through different things all of us as couples. You get into this, how can I help you meet your values? How can I help you work through the areas that you're inflexible, and how can I be in that moment with you, and supporting each other in those areas. And sometimes we have things that oppose each other, and we can help each other by compromising in some areas to work through some things too. But again, these conversations need to happen at peaceful times.
Once someone's elevated,
not good.
Probably you shouldn't
not
keep
good.
Trying at that point. We're gonna have to come back to it. We'll have to circle around.
Let it go.
That lake again. Separate corners of the house is a good idea at this point. Yeah. And let's come back to this later.
And that's always good too, by the way. Make sure you say, hey, this is too important to talk about while we're elevated. Let's come back to this.
The brain doesn't even work right at that level. Like once you become irritated, it doesn't, frustrated, your brain isn't even functioning right. You're not using the same part of the brain as your frustrations.
And we'll get into more areas of conflict and different things later, but we want to move into some different areas in further videos. I wanted to make sure you had some tools now as things are changing so rapidly though. But maybe you're a single parent at home. We had some comments about that last time. You're working through with the kids. Just really quickly, some things you can do with children if you're dealing with them, because again, they've lost all their control. A lot of control. They've lost a lot of predictables. Yeah. So they're all up in the air anyways. I will tell you this: if you can stay regulated as a parent, you can stay calm. You can by that alone help them realize it's going to be okay and we're going to get through this. But makes a big difference there. But parents, though, stay relational. Really try to keep the relationship alive with your kids. That's the bridge into their life. That's the best way to communicate with them too. Yeah. And we already covered it in here already, talking about in couples. But don't react, respond. Don't just fire off at them because they're upset at the moment. You may be upset. You guys have been sharing the same space. They're in your space. They're trying to do school and trying to not do school, trying to go get out of the house. You're trying to keep them in the house. It's a tough time. So just realize it's okay for things not to be okay. Yeah. It's not going to be, it's a tough time for everybody. They're allowed to express that and feel that respectfully, obviously, but still. And again, we talk about seeking to understand. Try to understand what they're going through, some of the issues they're doing. And you can calmly set boundaries and say, these are going to be the boundaries. Have as much fun. Boundaries are like a guardrail on a mountain road. I know we've been to the mountain several times. We've been there. You see these roads, and they have these signs that are like an S with a line through it, and the speed limit's like 7. and you realize 7 is way too fast for this road. When I'm I go to those roads, I'm really comforted by that guardrail. I've never hit a guardrail ever in my life, but I do feel comfortable because I know I can have as much fun on the road of life as I want, and there's danger on the other side of that guardrail. And so as parents, we're responsible in these ever-changing, dynamic times to set those guardrails.
Yeah.
And say, we don't come within certain feet of people. We don't do the things we used to do a week ago or 2 weeks ago.
Just temporarily pause.
Yeah. Again, we're talking about that winter, right? It's Jamie said last time, this is the winter, not a blizzard. Right. We're making some changes here, and we have to adapt in that too. But and remember, the skills you're teaching them, they're going to have for their lifetime. This is not the last time they're going to have to deal with disease or sickness, and so
focus
these are
on the other people. Focus on your community.
Yeah, it's really good advice too. So, anyway, awesome, good seeing with you guys. We're going to connect next time, probably a little bit later tomorrow if we do it tomorrow night or not. Yeah, I really want to get into how you can be quarantined with the person that you and remain quarantined with the person you want to be quarantined to most. In other words, the relationship. Yeah, we better walk through that one. Yeah, we better talk through. Might be too soon. Maybe too soon for that one. No, but again, we're stuck all this time. He's home, she's home. Yeah. What can we do? How can we maximize this moment? So we'll get into that later, though. But again, we appreciate you guys. Look forward to connecting, and we'll see you soon. Mm-hmm.